Steve Daniels from Crain's Chicago Business at chicagobusiness.com has been following this for some time. And it's important to the area because the Byron plant is one of those on the list of potentially unprofitable nuclear power plants. And, well, Exelon threatening closure of some of those unprofitable plants if they don't get some help. A little more information out this week. Steve Daniels on it at chicagobusiness.com. Steve, good morning. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate the time this morning. I know a little more information may clear on a conference call with analysts this week on the future of some of the Exelon plants. Before we get to the new stuff, for people who have not been paying attention, summarize how we got to this point where Exelon's talking about potentially closing nuclear power plants in the state. The thumbnail version.
Yeah, the thumbnail version is that for over a year, Exelon has made plain to lawmakers down in Springfield that they were having issues with some of their nuclear plants in Illinois, which were losing money. How much money each of those plants were losing, Exelon didn't really let on, but they said they offered up a solution, which meant it was a piece of legislation that would raise electric bills for everybody pretty much in the state, and funnel about something close to $300 million of additional revenue to Exelon's nuclear plants. That legislation was not acted on in the last session as sort of budget issues, and the budget war consumed people. So Exelon is now nearing its day of reckoning on a couple of those plants. One of those being the Byron plant near you guys, and the other one, the Quad Cities plant on the Mississippi River.
And what was the Clinton plant? Is that right? Also, at some point was bandied about?
Right, that's the other one that's on the chopping block downstate. And they have indicated that they'll make a decision on Clinton early next year. So the decision on Byron and Quad Cities is coming in September.
And according to what we know on a conference call this week, the CEO of Exelon, Crain, talking, and as you mentioned, September is the time that Exelon will decide the future of Quad Cities and Byron, and it looks like Quad Cities could be in some trouble, yes?
Yeah, I think, as you kind of indicated in the lead-in here, they've sort of been slightly cryptic on this stuff, but he was about as clear on this call as he's really been since all of this started. And he basically said Quad Cities, there was virtually no hope for that plant without state legislation. So I certainly would expect an announcement from Exelon that they are going to start the process of closing Quad Cities in September. Byron is a different question. Sort of continually, analysts have really only brought up Quad Cities and not Byron, and it's been a little puzzling to me. The company itself continues to maintain that Byron is vulnerable. But if you talk to Wall Street folks, I think the betting there is that Byron will be spared, but that Quad Cities will not. But we'll find out for sure in about a little over a month, I think.
Of the three plants, Steve Daniels with us, Crain Chicago Business, of the three, Byron is the largest and Clinton is the smallest, is that correct?
That is correct. Byron's the largest, and Clinton is a single unit, is the only one of Exelon's 6 stations in Illinois. That's a single unit one. All the rest are dual unit. Byron is also one of the newest in quotes, but that was built in the mid-'80s, whereas Quad Cities was came online in the early 70s. So that's a big difference there as well. But again, they haven't publicly released the numbers for any of these plants.
Right.
But everything that I hear is that the profitability issues are far worse at Quad Cities than they are at Byron.
Steve Daniels with us from Crain Chicago Business, chicagobusiness.com. Scott Bertram sitting in for Michael Coolidge Show. Now, if Exelon says we're going to close Quad Cities, does that mean close, or does that mean we're going to temporarily stop and perhaps bring it back online in the future? What steps does it appear they would take?
Now, for some types of power plants, you can do that. You sort of mothball them and bring them back online if market conditions improve. But nuclear plants are complex animals. I think if they, everything I've heard and understood about that process is that if they actually move to close the plant, that's pretty much it. And you start the process of decommissioning it, and which is an involved multi-year process. So a nuclear plant is a different kind of animal than any other power plant. Not to say that it's completely impossible. Certainly when they closed the Zion plant on Lake Michigan, back in the late 90s, there were sort of discussions, not very serious, not from Exelon, but from others about bringing that back online at various points. But now that's decommissioning is well underway there, and that's done. So my understanding is that if they actually get to that point, that it's a done deal. Now, one caveat to that, they make an announcement in September. There's 6 or 7 months before, at least according to the company, before that decision becomes irreversible. So, that still leaves time for some sort of a deal in Springfield that might spare it.
Steve, one of the reasons that Exelon says that they need help is the proliferation of wind power available and the price it's available at, thanks to some government subsidies and getting the price down. But the problem with wind at times is it's a little unreliable, and we know during the past 2 winters, in fact, without nuclear plants, without Exelon's load ability to produce power, there might have been some disruptions in service here in Illinois. Isn't that right?
Well, that's the argument they make. I think that wind certainly doesn't help matters for them in terms of the financials, but the bigger issue in terms of why those plants are so pressured is the very low price of natural gas, which correlates very strongly with what the price of power is on the wholesale markets. I think in terms of the very cold winters that we've had. 2 winters ago, the polar vortex winter, there were a few days that were nerve-wracking for the wholesale grid operator that includes Northern Illinois, mainly more on the eastern end of their territory. It goes all the way to Washington, D.C. But in this last winter, where they actually had similar demand spikes to the previous one, there were not the same kind of problems at all, nothing even close. Now, clearly, nuclear plays an important role in keeping those kind of problems from happening. I don't think there's any question about that. But the issues back in the 2 years ago had to do with coal plants and gas plants not coming online when they were supposed to at various points, and in this last winter they did. So some of those plants clearly took steps to fix the issues that afflicted them 2 years ago.
And Steve Daniels, Crain Chicago Business, as we let you go, I know some of the numbers are hazy, as you mentioned. Exelon's not really letting people see what they're losing or what the numbers look like, but any indication, if in fact Quad Cities is closed in September, what that might do to the price of power in Illinois?
That's a really good question. I've asked it myself a number of times, and I don't have a great answer for you. I think everything that I've heard sort of distilled would amount to maybe a very slight increase in power prices from just Quad Cities. Now, Byron closed too. I think that would be different.
Right.
But if it's just Quad Cities, a very modest, I think, increase might be in store.
So, Steve Daniels, Quad Cities decision in September, Clinton early next year, and for the moment at least, indications are Byron looks okay.
That's how I read it. We'll see. We're going to know a lot more. There's an auction by the wholesale grid operator next month that will provide potentially more revenue to all of those plants. Quad Cities is not likely to clear that auction, was what Exelon was saying. But Byron's a different matter. If Byron does clear that auction and is part of that mix, then I think you can just assume at that point that Byron will continue to operate.
All right, Steve Daniels, Crain Chicago Business. Follow him following this story at chicagobusiness.com. And I'm sure we'll talk again, too. Thanks, Steve.
Yep, thank you.